love a Ghostbusters movie that has some scary moments in it,
Mm-hmm.
a la number one. And like, and I thought it was super funny. I liked it. I had a great time. I thought it was a great movie. I didn't ever once have a feeling during the movie of like, oh, like this isn't fun or this isn't what I wanted it to be. I was invested all the way to the end, and then the end like left me like excited when, you know, like the Ghostbusters song kicks in.
We are back. Welcome back to the Movie Dads podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Howie.
Kyle.
That is Kyle. Kyle, episode number 42. The big premiere movie of the week, supernatural comedy sequel, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Excited to talk about it because we have not discussed it in the slightest. Yeah, so this will be the first time. But episode 42, we're chugging along. We're getting up to our 1-year anniversaries right around the corner. Who can believe it?
Mind blown.
Mind blown. But if you're watching us on YouTube, please click like and subscribe. Click that bell so you get notifications when new episodes come out. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. If you're not watching us on YouTube, hopefully you're listening to us on one of the many podcast networks such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Podcast Index. You can also see some of our short clips and videos on social media at Movie Dads Pod, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, which is being a pain in the ass lately.
What's wrong with TikTok?
It's still like there's no views. It's it shut us down.
Well, I heard that there was like a vote in like Congress or something to ban TikTok. Like,
right. Yeah.
They don't want the world, the powers that be to take over by social media. So
don't let the youths use Chinese social media, but
it's our biggest it's our biggest traffic. So
it was but we'll leave politics out of this because I could say there's a lot more important things to worry about other than TikTok.
Yep.
But we're movie dads. We've got movie kids. We went and saw Ghostbusters Frozen Empire as a family this weekend. We saw it on Thursday opening night in the Dolby at AMC, which was pretty awesome. That's my favorite format to see movies in because I like the really large sound. And it's not quite as big as IMAX, but it's still a bigger screen than the traditional. So it's kind of nice. And that has really good picture. The Dolby picture quality is good. But we saw that. Family was pretty happy with that. And then we had the kids had a thing with my wife's stepmom where she took all the grandkids and they did like game night Saturday night. So it was like free night for the parents to like go all hang out together. So we went and got sushi and then kind of drove around, hung out because it was a couple hours. But then of course we go to pick the kids up and all the cousins are like, we want to spend the night together. So here come a bunch of the cousins come over to our house on Saturday night after this game night. So they hung out. So we had a little group sleepover with family on Saturday night. And that was it. That was kind of it for us this weekend.
Nice. Love that. Same for me on the dad front. Me and the boys went to see Ghostbusters together. So
nice.
Steph had dance. So like I had to finagle like, okay, I've got the baby and the two boys. How am I going to make this work? So it was a full day of planning and moving around and dropping a baby off and putting bags and diapers with grandma, getting kids fed so we could like line up our movie time right. And we went and saw it in IMAX.
Nice.
My middle son is like he's old enough to be able to watch this movie. Like he's watched Afterlife at home and has been fine with it. But he's like young enough that I didn't contemplate on how like scary it was going to be for him. So
sure.
In theater, when we were walking in, like we walked in right as like the trailers were ending, so it was pitch black. It was super loud, and he like turtled up, and so he ended up sitting on my lap, like buried in my armpit for most of the movie, and I was just covering his ears for any scary parts, and then when the scary parts were done, he would go back to watching. So, which makes me sound like a bad dad, but he freaking loved it. He has been talking about the movie since. He is a big Slimer fan after this movie. But yeah, it was a ton of fun. Grayson loved it. The second that my wife got home, they have been like word vomit telling her the entire movie of everything that's happened in it. So
Nice.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was cool to just the boys going to a movie together. And all I could think as we were there was like, I hope that I get to do this a lot more over the years because this is fucking fun.
It is. I'm sure you will. So that's good. Maybe you get a sidekick like I have with Reagan, and like she's all about going to that kind of stuff. But that's great. That's great.
I can't pinpoint which one it's going to be, but sometimes I think it's one, and then a couple of days later, I'll think it's the other of which one likes my nerd stuff more. So I think Parker might be the one, but then every now and then Grayson will come in, and Grayson is like, the way he kind of nerds out is he doesn't talk about it when he's watching it. He doesn't act like he's even paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then he will like word for word, line for line, drop knowledge of a movie we watched one time 5 years ago. And he'll be like, oh no, Dad, remember this was that exact thing. And I'm like, how the fuck did you know that?
Nice.
Does it all the time. So, but yeah, that was Dad world and my world.
That's great. Awesome.
But I guess that leads us to our most excited segment, our 6 to Midnight. This is the segment about the things that get us up in the morning for nerd stuff this week. There was a ton of cool new stuff.
Tons of stuff.
Ton of trailers, tons of new releases.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to jump into it because like I could not wait to talk about this on the pod. But X-Men 97 dropped, and first 2 episodes dropped, and they are perfect.
Yes.
It's so good. Like, it's exactly what we wanted. And for me, like, it was a huge reminder. It was like all of a sudden, like, the floodgates opened of like, oh my God, I forgot how much I loved Marvel as a kid because of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like this version of X-Men is fucking awesome. And it's been so long, and the live action movies have strayed so far off of what this show was that I had forgotten, like, oh yeah, I forgot that they totally freaking ruined Cyclops in the live action movies and made him like a total weenie, when in the cartoon he was a badass leader. And
Talk
my
about
God,
Cyclops in that show. Oh,
he is so cool. He is a coolest superhero landing of all time. Like, I just love how they use, like, when he's fighting, he's using his freaking his vision to backdash, to like stop himself from falling out of a plane, slowing himself down, like actually like hitting dudes in the elbow while they're blocking like fights. Like, they just made him so freaking badass again.
Yep.
I love it. They like, I love that they've leaned into, it's in the 90s, like the way they talk. Even Cyclops has like a line that he said in earlier episodes. It's super 90s, where like they capture him and he's like, oh no, you've got me. Not, and then like blows them up, and that's like such a 90s thing.
He like straight he thought he straight murdered people.
Yeah, he literally murked them on this show, and it's for adults. It's not for kids. This is like for us that watched this when we were growing up.
I agree, but I mean, at the same time, like, your kids can watch. Yeah, totally.
But this, been watching it.
But this was definitely made for those of us that grew up watching this show. I was like watching the first episode, like I totally like felt like I was right back in the old series, like the old vibe completely. And then the second episode, I was like, holy shit, I think they took it to the next level. Like
Yes.
it was, there were so many things that happened, so much going on. I don't want to get too spoilery, but like you even said, just the way some of the characters are, and you saw this in one of the trailers. And I remember when it came out, that first trailer, and people saw it and they're like, holy shit, why didn't anybody do this before? But Wolverine has his claws out. Gambit literally climbs on his back and rides him, and then charges him with the kinetic energy, charges his claws, and he jumps up and hits the Sentinel, and just the claws just blow the Sentinel to pieces. It's awesome.
Takes his head right off.
Yeah.
Which I think is it's like in the older show and obviously in the comics, which this show is leaning heavily into very specific comic book stories. Sure. I won't give any details or spoilers, right. But like in the old show and in the comics, all the time they're in like the war room, like practicing. I can't remember if it's called the war room, whatever. Danger room, where they're like practicing doing, like they're teaming up and they're using each other's like powers. And so I thought that was cool, that like Gambit Wolverine, and then Morph turns into the Blob, and then he launches Wolverine up. Like it's fucking awesome. I am enjoying it so much. So the
only beef I had is, and again, this is straight out of the 90s, but Magneto's dumbass costume with like the exposed shoulders.
Dude,
it looks like he's wearing like super long gloves. Like it's so dumb.
He's nerdy.
With the giant M on it.
But that is exactly his comic book outfit.
I know. I've seen the comic book cover. I know what it's from. It just looks terrible.
It does look super dorky, but I love like where the story, I just like, it's perfect.
It is perfect. Yeah.
I saw today that they were like rumors of green lighting like a reboot of Spider-Man, the animated series that they had back in the day. So, which I'm like, holy shit, please. So give me that. Give me Batman the Animated Series, new versions. Mind blowing.
Yeah. Awesome stuff.
What you got?
Well, so I had a lot. I talked about it on the last episode. I was going to go see Late Night with the Devil, which was the David Dalsmakian like indie movie, independent film channel sponsored talk show, like 77 talk show. It was exactly what I'd hoped it would be. The reviews were all tremendous. It was super cool. Like it kind of starts off slow and gets going, but you didn't lose interest because you knew something was going on right away. It was really entertaining, super cool. The 70s vibe is perfect. Like you totally pick up on it right away. Nice. Weird ending, but I wasn't disappointed or anything. I really loved the movie. I was super excited. I definitely recommend it. I think it was the biggest weekend premiere in like IFC film history or something. Cool. Made like $3 million, but yeah, nice. I totally recommend that. We had a couple trailers, big movie trailers that came out last week. Beetlejuice finally dropped. It's a teaser. There wasn't a lot to it, but obviously we see Jenna Ortega, Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara's back. They're in the same town, in the same house. And then it doesn't like, there's really no talking in the trailer until the very end, but you kind of get the sense that Jenna Ortega finds the model of the town and brings Beetlejuice back. And then he just kind of rises out of the model and just says the juice is loose. And boy, it was cool to see Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice again. But
how wild is that? You sent me a GIF of like, it's 1989. Like I'm going to it's 1980 something. I'm going to see Ghostbusters.
Yes,
it's 1989. I'm going to see Beetlejuice. And then you're like, it's 2024.
Yeah,
I'm going to Ghostbusters and Beetlejuice.
Yeah, and I'm going to Beetlejuice. Great. Oh, it was, and there was another one. It was like it's 1984. I'm going to go see Dune.
Yes. Oh yeah, that was the other one. The Dune. Yeah. Like, I love it.
I know, right? And then the other one that I was pretty excited for was Alien Romulus, which is the Fede Alvarez Alien movie. And if it doesn't, if it doesn't look like a return to the first movie, like,
God,
and
thank you.
and it looks like, and they already said it's going to take place after the first movie, but before the second movie. So it takes place in between that, like while Ripley's in deep sleep, right? So it takes place before Aliens, but it totally looks like the first movie. Like it looks like a horror movie. I don't know how many aliens there are. It might just be one, but
dude, please just be one.
It looks right. It looks,
yes.
We've had so many weird with after Prometheus and then Covenant, and I don't know, just
we've talked on this show about how like strange, how it's felt like such total swing and miss.
Yeah,
with most of the anything related to the Alien franchise.
I mean, it's like Alien and Aliens are here, right? And then I would say Alien 3's here, 4's. They're pretty close. 3 and 4 about
everything is,
and then the rest is down
the
there. Because it's like you took the simplest premise in space for a horror movie. Basically, you created a space horror movie. You made a sequel where you turned it into a space action movie, which was awesome. And then the third one was, I liked the story, and I'd love to have seen a director's cut because I always, heard rumors that Fincher said it was messed with. And then the fourth one was a little weird. Like that's where they started to kind of like branch out and kind of do weird stuff where they did cloning and hybrid aliens, right? And it was a little weird. And then Prometheus, I don't know what the fuck the rest of it was. Whatever. Yeah,
that was like the very first thing I text you. Was like, oh my God, this looks like the original, which is a good thing. It's been so long since that came out. Like these kids these days, they don't really know the original and what that was like. They might know what these new random things are where they're trying to world build and get convoluted with their like backstory and stuff. But it looks scary. It looks creepy. It's on what looks like a derelict like ship. I don't know how many characters are in it, but in the trailer it felt like one person hiding from a big scary monster, which is
or it's awesome. A crew, and you don't see there might not be many. I don't know. I'm excited to see it though.
Yeah, the set pieces, the costume, everything looked like the setting of the original. So love it.
And I heard that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to make it look like, it's in the future, but like the technology is going to look like it did in the 70s. Like it's going to be like old tube TV monitors.
Analog.
Like very much so. And then you also get the sense from the trailer and you see like blood and stuff. It's going to be a gory movie. Like you get the sense. And obviously Fede Alvarez, if you saw his Evil Dead remake, like there's a lot of blood. So I would think we're going to get more of that. So yeah, it looks good. I'm excited for that one.
Thank
and
God
then the last thing I had was the Last Ronin 2 Revolution, the new comic book came out. I don't get to talk about comics very much. It's more your wheelhouse, but this is the sequel series to obviously Last Ronin, which was a Ninja Turtles all-time classic. And this is a variant cover that came straight from Kevin Eastman directly. They only made 600 of them. So I was pretty excited to get my hands on that one. But
how badass is that?
Yeah, 10 years after the Last Ronin, first issue's out now. But yeah, it's a pretty cool story, good continuation. So interesting. I'm excited to have that variant cover. So
I didn't. Just one more thing, I didn't see a trailer for this yet, but for whatever reason, the first I saw of it was when we were at the theater. There was like a movie poster for The Strangers. I don't think we have like talked about it on the episode at all from the show. But we have talked about The Strangers and how, for me, that's like one of my like scariest movies of all time.
I remember you talking about that, yeah.
And
there is a trailer out.
Oh, cool! I haven't watched that.
I haven't seen it yet either, but I do know it's out.
Oh, I need to check it out. That's so weird that I haven't seen anything for it. So the tagline for it was like exactly how we talked about it. Of like, it's so scary because it could happen. And there's no reason at all. They have no purpose of why they're doing it, just to do it. And the tagline was something like that, like for no reason at all. It's like, oh my God, people are horrible and scary, and I can't wait for that. So, there's that. There was. There was another one, but I can't think of it. I'll think about it later. Let's
Yeah,
jump
that's
into
a
the next
lot
one.
though. There's a lot of new stuff coming out. So hopefully we have another eventful week this week with new trailers and new news. So, but that takes us into our big premiere movie of the week, the new supernatural comedy Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Now, we didn't see this together. And like I said, we saw this with our kids. And then, so we haven't even talked about it at all, right? Like we don't even know what either one of us thinks about it. So that's all going to be new. But just to get through the informational piece, first off, we will kind of touch on it without giving away spoilers. Give our spoiler warning like normal. If anybody wants to skip ahead to the end because they haven't gotten a chance to see it yet, feel free to go ahead. And then we'll kind of dive into the more spoilery parts after that. But Ghostbusters Frozen Empire was produced and distributed by Columbia Pictures and Sony Pictures Releasing. It's directed by Gil Keenan off a script that he wrote with Jason Reitman. Jason Reitman directed Afterlife. Gil Keenan and him wrote both movies. And then Gil Keenan took over directing duties for this one. The cast obviously includes returning characters from Afterlife: Paul Rudd, Carrie Coon, Finn Wolfhard, and McKenna Grace, with new characters played by Kumail Nanjiani, Patton Oswalt, Emily Allen Lind, and James Acaster. And then, of course, our returning cast of Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, Annie Potts, and William Atherton, who hasn't been seen since the original, which I thought was kind of cool to see him as the mayor of New York City. I thought that was pretty fun. Old Walter Peck himself. Budget of $100 million. It made $45.2 million opening weekend domestic, $61 million worldwide over the weekend. It did push Ghostbusters as a franchise past the $1 billion mark. Now,
fascinating.
I will say this: I always get a little weird when reviews don't drop until the day before a movie premieres. I get a little worried because that usually means that the studio has asked critics
don't tell anyone
not put their reviews out until a certain date. They always put an embargo on reviews. So when it's the day before, I always get a little worried because we had reviews for a bunch of stuff out weeks in advance, right? Reviews. So when they started coming out Wednesday morning, they were all over the place. I was reading all these different reviews. They were all over the place. There were reviews that said it wasn't funny enough. There were reviews that said it was the funniest Ghostbusters. There were reviews that said the story was too complicated. There were reviews that said that the story was too simple. There were reviews that said there were too many characters.
Yep.
Which was one of the biggest beefs everybody seemed to have. But there was also people that were like, great movie, great family stuff. And then there were others that were like, this is a terrible story. I'm tired of these people, blah, blah, blah. It was literally all over the place. And that's why if you look on Rotten Tomatoes, it's at like 46%. I mean, it is cut down right down the middle. Obviously, the cinema score, audience score was a little bit higher. I think it was like 86%, which is usually how it goes. Because critics don't know shit about fuck. But they don't. We've talked about that before.
Yes,
facts. Mainstream critics they like being artsy fartsy and they don't like appealing to the general audience. Initial thoughts before we talk about spoilers. I liked it. I enjoyed the movie. I agree with a lot of the things that were said. I did think there was too many characters. You and I talked last episode when we watched the original two Ghostbusters about ghostbusting and how there needs to be more ghostbusting. And this seemed like it was more about trying to figure out like what this thing was that they had, this artifact, and what it all meant and stuff like that. And then there was a little bit of, family drama and teenage angst. And then, we just didn't get a whole lot of Ghostbusting, which was kind of a bummer. But like I said, overall, it was funny. I enjoyed it. I would recommend people that like Ghostbusters to go see this movie. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. And we've talked about this often, like you usually will check out reviews before a movie I will go out of my way not to, because like I don't want to be swayed in any direction. I know it would have been all over the place because once I saw them after, I went in with like open mind, excited because it's a Ghostbusters movie. I had my kids with me, like I thought there were moments that were kind of scary, which maybe it felt scary because my kids were there and it scared the shit out of them. But like, I love a Ghostbusters movie that has some scary moments in it, a la number one. And like, and I thought it was super funny. I liked it. I had a great time. I thought it was a great movie. I didn't ever once have a feeling during the movie of like, oh, like this isn't fun or this isn't what I wanted it to be. I was invested all the way to the end. And then the end like left me like excited, you know, like when the Ghostbusters song kicks in and like everyone's like, we're fucking Ghostbusters. Like I was like hype, like, all right, this is awesome. I agree with you. They did have a shit ton of characters in the movie, which I had thought about seeing a review, and then saw that was a lot of other people's problem. There's just a shit ton of people that were thrown in and like trying to keep up with everyone who's who, and like they did that pretty quickly.
And then it felt like some of the side characters from Afterlife, right? Like Podcast and then Lucky, the girl, like they were shoehorned into the movie.
Yes.
In like totally weird ways. Like, oh, my parents think I'm at space camp. Oh, I'm interning for the summer just to get you back in the movie. Like, you can stay in Oklahoma. It's cool. Well, like we didn't need you, really.
Both of them were interning. The one, like which was, I did have that thought of like, oh, both of these characters from this past movie just happened to be interning in New York.
He was like interning at the bookstore, and she's interning at
Ghostbusters World.
Yeah, Ghostbusters place. So that was like, you just tried too hard there.
Yeah, I was happy they put Podcasts in it because he was funny as hell in the last one. Clearly time has passed and they've grown up a little bit, so he's not
that kid looked like he was like 25.
Yeah, Lord. He grew up a ton. So like he wasn't as goofy as like a Stranger Things actor character. He was a little bit older, but I still like that character. Dan Aykroyd and him together, I think, was the right combo.
Right, and we'll get into details, but I was happy to see how much Dan Aykroyd was in the movie.
Dude, yes.
Which was great.
Yes. They, well, yeah, I'm not going to jump into spoilers till we get to them, but I liked the movie. I had a blast. I would say go see it in theater. This was a fun Ghostbuster movie theater movie.
Yep, I agree. So we'll do spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. Get out.
Get.
And so that way we can talk about stuff. So, yeah, man, I overall liked the movie. I thought the story was pretty good. Obviously the trailers, you think that there's this deep freeze for a while, and it's really, it's like the last half hour, right? It's like the last 30 minutes, which I get. You had to do a little bit of build up to get to that point, but I don't know. I felt like a little, maybe they teased us a little bit and pulled a little wool over our eyes on that one. But
I actually was glad. I think we talked about that I was kind of like, I want Ghostbusters in New York City because the city is a part of their characters, but the thought of them being in like a post-apocalyptic frozen world the whole movie, like I don't know how that's going to work. So I was kind of glad.
Maybe if it would have been like the second half of the movie and not just like the last quarter of the movie.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. A little bit more. Well, like we were talking about, like Dan Aykroyd's in this movie a ton. I would say he's a main cast member in this movie based on how much he's in it, because he's in it through the whole movie. And Ernie Hudson's in it the whole movie too. He has a bigger role, which I think we talked about this last week. I love what they did with his character. Like he's the successful one, and which is so funny because it was, in the original it was like, if there's a steady paycheck, he can, he doesn't give a shit. He'll do whatever. Bill Murray's in a couple of scenes, right? Like, which, he didn't just show up at the end. He was in one other scene, which was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I liked the new characters. Patton Oswalt was barely in the movie. He's kind of just like this, like, we're going to give you information about this, what's going to happen kind of deal, right?
Yeah.
Kumail, I thought his character was interesting. And, I think people might have had a little beef with like, oh, you've got like a superhero character kind of
like
now.
Superpowers.
But I mean, like, this is a Ghostbusters movie. Like, everything in this movie is bullshit. So it's, basically, like, he can bend fire and he's got to fight the frozen thing. It's like he comes from this long lineage of firebenders, essentially, right? Like, which I thought was funny.
Here's what I thought. So one I was like, what? Okay, so we've got like he can control fire. Like,
yeah.
I mean, like you said, I also had the thought of like, well, it is Ghostbusters. There's a fucking Godzilla-sized marshmallow man. So like, how is that out of the norm? But the thing I thought was cool about that was that it's almost like telling you that like ghosts didn't just show up because the Ghostbusters started and we're doing Ghostbusters stuff. Like there has been people and groups fighting the paranormal for millennia. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yep.
I thought he was a bad guy. I thought early on, like they were leaning into him being like a bad guy. So that didn't go the direction I thought. And then when I realized, like, is he possessed or something? What's going on with this fire that Bill Murray keeps trying to mess with? And I'm like, oh, he's causing it to move.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I was with you on that one too. I thought like he's possessed. Something's gonna happen there, but it wasn't the case.
Yeah,
so
because they had just shown this machine that could suck a ghost out of an object, and so I thought that was leading to them sucking the ghost out of him.
Right.
Sounds really inappropriate when I say it like that. I think the movie did a good job with what we had just talked about on the last episode of me. Like, I felt like Afterlife was setting up like to give us these new characters.
Yep.
Then to bring in the old, and then this movie was so we could get them like, how do they work together?
They work together? And it's almost like an official passing of the torch, right? Because now they're together, and it's like, and you kind of get that scene too. There's that scene with Ernie Hudson and Dan Aykroyd where he's like, these are your golden years, Ray. Like, you should be on a beach somewhere and stuff like that. And Ray's like, this is what I love, and this is what I want to do. And I thought that was great because they did a great job with those two characters of keeping them completely involved with the Ghostbusters, right? Like Ernie Hudson, like Winston's funding it.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing, like he's funding it, and Ray's like still in it. Like he's like the experience that's like teaching them how to do it kind of deal, which I thought was pretty awesome. Yeah,
it felt like true to his character from the original two. Like he is the one that's like super invested in what they're doing and the Ghostbusters and cares about it. I thought they did a cool job of like blending that with real life Dan Aykroyd, who is like a paranormal nerd, and like he owns one of the like what is it, something Hedges crystal skulls. Like he owns one of the like crystal skulls in real life. Like he's a paranormal nerd. So him having
he owns the vodka company, Crystal Skull Vodka.
Yes, he does. So like I thought that was cool that he has like a store with paranormal objects, and as him and podcast are doing like a little show with finding out if something is paranormal or not. So
it's cool too, because that was a callback, because obviously in the second one that's what he's doing way back in 1989. He's working to raise occult books. That's his store, and now it's kind of evolved into this, like he's finding these ghost possessed artifacts so that they can basically destroy them and pull the ghosts out of them, so that he's basically stopping the hauntings before they happen. Is what he's trying to do, which I thought that was kind of a neat little story piece too.
I think I liked the bad guy. I thought he was super creepy, like when he finally shows up. I think at some point towards the end when he's like trying to fight them in the Ghostbusters ghost house, like the firehouse, I'm almost positive I saw they were doing like stop motion for his like long creepy fingers and a lot of his movement. So like I think that just kind of made it feel more ghosty and scary, like he was like stop motion moving. I can't really
I know what you're saying.
Explain it. So
no, I thought he was cool too. Yeah, basically, like he's not in the movie at all until the very, very end. I guess we might as well just basic premise is Kumail's character brings an orb that he has. He brings a box of stuff to Ray's. And Ray is testing them all to see if there's ghost activity in these objects. And the orb basically breaks the PKE meter because it's so full of supernatural power.
Yeah.
And like the orb keeps doing weird stuff. The weird things keep happening. There's these ice, whatever, bursts over the city because of what's happening with this orb. Because the orb has been basically, we find out later, has been removed from a prison that was in Kumail's grandmother's apartment building because she was this fire warrior or whatever. And it was their job to guard the orb to make sure that this god never escaped. Right?
Yes.
Obviously there's a subplot we'll talk about here in a minute with Phoebe's character that unleashes the god Grok.
Yep.
And that's what brings the frozen whatever to New York. And then Grok wants to break into the containment unit and get all the ghosts out to create an undead army to take over the world. Basic plot line of the movie.
I thought it was cool that they were like, you've been stuffing ghosts into this thing since 1980? Like, what did you think was going to happen? Like, that the ghost container is full to the brim, and now they need to do something to stop that. And then when they talk about, like, just to give scope, if we were to move it to this new Ghostbuster lab that we find out Winston is funding, basically like a Ghostbuster company where he's got interns and scientists working.
Yep.
That they're like, if we were to transfer all of them like every day, it would take like 7 years to unload this.
Trap by trap, one by one. It would take 7 years to unload all the ghosts.
Holy shit.
There's a lot of ghosts in that trap.
So we're talking about like, I wanted more ghost busting. Which I sent you a screenshot today because I thought, IGN must be listening to our podcast because they had a post specifically that was like, give us more ghost busting, like plumber call Ghostbusters, like the basic stuff, which is what we've talked about. And this movie kind of did that or was going for it, but they got called a ton to go out and like, to something's happened, Ghostbusters need to go. But the point of view of the story was from the daughter who Ghostbusters had gotten in trouble for like basically destroying a bunch of public property by the mayor.
Which they're known to do.
And the mayor is known to hate them. And so they early on destroy a bunch of stuff. They get called in almost like they're called into the principal's office, and they point out that one of the Ghostbusters is like 15, like she's not old enough, or 16, she's not old enough to be doing this type of stuff,
right?
And so they basically like they like put her on leave, essentially saying that
she's benched for like 3 years until she's old enough to be Ghostbuster.
So then like for a majority of the movie is her being like angry that she can't be a Ghostbuster while they keep getting called to like take off and peel out of the firehouse to go off. So we never got to go with them for all these Ghostbuster calls, but they got called a lot in the movie. And I think the movie maybe set that up to where now we have a little bit more established like what they are and what they can do, and maybe we can get more of that in the next movie. So
I agree. The family dynamic, like first off, I think bringing Paul Rudd in to kind of lead the new cast is perfect because If there was a modern day equivalent of an original Ghostbuster, Paul Rudd fits the bill perfectly, right?
Yes.
Because he's got a pedigree where he's done an action superhero kind of movie. He's
Mm-hmm.
obviously in comedies more than anything else,
Yep.
right? So he fits the perfect bill. And he's a scientist. They made him a scientist in Afterlife, right? He's a seismologist. So which is great because now he's the new Ghostbuster. And then you have Carrie Coon's character, Finn Wolfhard, and Phoebe, who are the Spangler family, right?
Yep.
Who he's now married and he's the stepdad. And there's a little bit about him, I don't know, holding the kids accountable, punishing them, kind of being, a little tougher if he needs to. And, you can tell he's not comfortable with it. He's not that kind of guy. But basically, Phoebe gets benched. And so, yes, those three are doing all these Ghostbuster calls, but we're following her, and she gets approached by a ghost who is in perfect human form, which you don't see a lot in Ghostbusters. And it's go ahead.
She just randomly shows up, and like they make you think. I think they are trying to make you think that it's Egon because she shows up while she's playing chess,
right?
And so you're like, oh, a ghost is moving the pieces, just like in the last movie. It's got to be Egon, and it's not.
Right.
So,
but I thought at the same time, I was like, why would it be Egon? Because he did what he needed to do. He moved on, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So it's this other teenage girl, and they strike up a friendship, and she's the only one that understands Phoebe, and Phoebe kind of like, what would it be like to be a ghost? Because they're the only ones that understand me, blah, blah, blah. Typical teenage, I'm used to that crap. But you find out later that this ghost is working for Grok to have Phoebe open the orb, which ends up happening, right? I don't usually talk about other reviewers, but I read Looper's review, and Looper was talking about how they hated the queer teenage subplot with a ghost in this movie. Right. And how they gave it like a 3 out of 10. It was bad.
It's uncomfortable.
It was, and it was like, listen, so these two obviously they have a relationship in the movie. It's a ghost and Phoebe. Okay. It's not, you don't know what kind of relationship it is, but obviously they're friends in the movie. But I never felt like it was inherently trying to push queer agenda on anybody, which was the dumbest thing I read in a review ever.
Yes.
But obviously they have a close relationship, and you just kind of don't know what it is. And that's, whatever. It's ambiguous. That's fine. Like, she's working for a freaking supernatural god, like she could be, it could be perfectly just her trying to dupe Phoebe and they become friends kind of deal. I thought all that was weird. I understood why they did, because it kind of drove the plot, but it did feel like those were my least favorite parts of the movie, just because I didn't care about the teenage angst. Phoebe's character obviously drove Afterlife because she was the one that Egon was pushing to, do all this stuff.
Yeah.
In this one, I thought it could have probably moved on from that. I didn't feel like she needs to still be the central character. I feel like it needs to be more like a group thing. Yeah. And I felt like it wasn't quite there the way it needed to be. Did you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's funny because that character, that ghost, and like essentially like wooing Phoebe and then was primarily to help release the bad guy. But that I don't know, like it felt weird that I know they've been chasing ghosts and things like that, but at no point have they been like close to a ghost and like been having regular conversations with them.
No.
Like, and so for one to just randomly show up while she's out and about in the park, like playing chess.
Yeah.
Like
talking to her, like she's there, right? Like they're just chatting it up.
Yes.
Weird.
And I know the last movie, she was like with Egon, she knew like who she was talking to, or like
Yeah, you
not
wasn't talking.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. She wasn't really talking with him, but she kind of
Right.
knew who it was, and she still kind of played like kind of hesitant with it. And then this one, all of a sudden, like a full like body apparition sits and is like hanging out with her, and there was no like,
hey, what are you into? Like,
this
no,
is
that's
super weird.
you're a
It
ghost.
was just like, oh, cool, yeah, like let's play chess. Like, oh, like we should hang out sometime. Like they're
Show me around the firehouse.
yeah. So like I get why they did that, because that was how they chose to drive like the plot through, and like tricks are into going to.
It felt like they knew that was what needed to drive the plot, and they're like, okay, but how do we make this happen? Because no ghost has ever like carried on a conversation in these movies before, and then they were like, well, we can't figure it out, so we're just gonna have the ghost be a human.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it doesn't work. It just, it seems a little off. I just didn't care for it, but I wasn't bothered by the subplot. I understood what was happening. You know, it was pretty obvious what was going to happen. Like she was tricking her. You knew that. You kind of picked up on that. And then I kind of figured she was going to be the one that was going to turn at the end and help with the matches. When she's carrying around the matches, is like, I see that
match,
coming.
Yes, the match felt very much. The second that firebender guy couldn't light his lighter, that was in my head, was like, oh, that
she's
one
got
goes
the
had
matches.
a single match, so that'll play out. But it felt like it felt kind of like a classic Ghostbusters movie to me. Like it was fun. They Ghostbusted when they needed to. We got a lot of nostalgia. I felt like Afterlife was like 80% nostalgia and 20% like ghostbusting, new version of the Ghostbusters. This felt like 80% new version of Ghostbusters with 20% of nostalgia, if that makes any sense.
I know what you're saying.
They did the right, they shifted more this time. We got the old stuff that we wanted, but like you said, Paul Rudd is fucking awesome as a Ghostbuster, and I totally buy that. And what's the kid's name from Stranger Things?
Finn Wolfhard.
Finn, he's in the movie a ton, but he doesn't really get like his chance to like spread his wings and be a big.
His biggest part in the movie is the shit with Slimer, because Slimer like basically lives in the attic, and he's trying to catch him, and he keeps sliming him because Slimer keeps outsmarting this character. That's his biggest thing. But I understand. He felt underused. Like it was like they put him in Afterlife because it's Finn Wolfhard. He's in everything right now. And then in this, it's like he's an afterthought. But so are Lucky and so are podcasts. Like those three they could not be in the movie and it'd totally be fine. They don't do anything with the plot whatsoever.
Yeah. So, I liked some of the ghosts that they put in this, like the red dot, like Possessor.
That was my favorite. Possessor's awesome. Like
it's a cool ghost.
You see in the trailer when they're at the library, the lion comes to life, and it's because Possessor can possess any inanimate object. He's like trash bag running away from him.
He had kind of creepy, freaky moments, but then hilarious ones, like where he's a fucking trash bag running from him. My son Parker, his favorite part of the movie that he's talked about 100 times is when the possessor took over the pizza and tries to run away as a pizza.
Yeah, that was funny.
Slimer shows up and eats the fucking pizza.
Right.
Parker, he fucking loved that. He thought that was so cool. So
you know what was actually cool was when Possessor takes over the proton pack and he's gonna zap him, and it turns out like Camille can bend the streams because they're essentially fire. That I thought was kind of neat, because it was like, cool. That's pretty badass. Yeah,
I thought that was cool, and I also thought it was fucking super Stephen King like that Possessor possessed the Ecto-1, like
the car. I
thought that was fucking super cool, very like Christine.
Yes, you're right. Yeah,
it was like where all the lights turned red, and it was like trying to run him over. So I thought that was kind of cool too.
Yeah.
But
Listen, I mean, like that was pretty much the whole storyline we gave you. Obviously, there's things in there we missed. It was cool. They when they're at the library with Patton Oswalt, like the old head library guy. It's the same one from the original movie, which I thought was he's in it for 2 seconds, but it was another one of those cool little things. I would have loved to see them get Rick Moranis in 5 minutes. I would have loved to have seen that. I knew they weren't probably gonna, but
great call. That's a total miss.
Because I mean, like the guy hasn't done a movie in forever, and it would have been neat that would have been the perfect movie to get him to come back for. You know what I mean?
Yes,
like, and I know
agree.
It didn't happen, but whatever, it's fine. Listen, like you said, I like the movie. I was thinking about how I was going to rate this because obviously it's got its flaws, and it's not Ghostbusters or Ghostbusters 2. I don't think it's in the ballpark.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about where I would rate this and Afterlife, and I think this is better than Afterlife to me.
Oh,
I would put it above Afterlife. And I think, and I liked Afterlife, and Afterlife's probably a 7. And I think I put Ghostbusters 2 at an 8. And I think I like Ghostbusters 2 better than this. So I'm going to go 7.5. Like, good movie. Definitely rewatchable. But yes, I think it still has things that they can improve on. And I hope it makes enough money that we get to see another one.
Yeah. I thought that was what a lot of the reviews were saying of like, this could go either way of getting a third one after. I like where your head's at of how you ranked that, or rated that. I don't want to give it an 8. I wouldn't want to give it a 7. But I really liked this movie, and for sake of not wanting to totally give away one of my top 5 lists later on, I did enjoy this movie more than some other Ghostbuster movies. So, but yeah, 7 out of 10 for me. But definitely go see it in theater. I can't wait for it to come out and watch it. I actually liked it a ton more than Afterlife, and I didn't hate Afterlife. But this, I agree. This feels more rewatchable than Afterlife.
I'm going to do a callback to what we talked about last week, right? Like we talked about every Ghostbusters movie that gets made gets compared to the 1984 original Ghostbusters, right? Because we talked about Ghostbusters 2 and how maybe it's not fairly compared to the original because of how good the original is, right? Like the original's all-time movie. I think this, if you view it by itself as its own thing, right? And you're not trying to compare it to another's, I think it's a very enjoyable movie. And I think fans of Ghostbusters will very much enjoy this movie and go see it. I might go see it again. If there's time and nothing else is coming out, I might try to go pop in and see this again because I did enjoy it. And there was things I want to see if I missed things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but definitely, So 7.5, 7 from Kyle. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Go see it. It's good.
Go see it.
Please go see it so we can get another one because I think we all want
another one.
I liked it
enough that I want another one.
Right. But that takes us into my favorite segment. There can be only 5.
Only 5.
So went a little on brand this week with Ghostbusters. Specifically, I did top 5 Ghostbusters Media, which means movies, TV shows, video games, whatever else you want to consider media, right? We could have done movies, because there's 5 now, but I didn't feel like that was necessarily the way I wanted to go. Anyway, all right. So top 5 Ghostbusters Media. Number 5, I had Frozen Empire.
Oh.
And then at number 5. Obviously, our list will be very similar because there's not a ton to choose from.
Okay. 5.
Frozen Empire. It's my 3rd favorite movie on this list. There you go. Spoiler alert. I have 3 movies on this list. So it's my 3rd of the movies on the list. Everything we just talked about in our last segment, really enjoyed the movie. I would recommend it. Go see it again. That kind of thing. Number 4, I had Ghostbusters the video game that came out. I think
maybe 2009.
Yeah, I was thinking 2009, 2010. Yeah, because I think it was like 360, PS3,
Yep.
kind of game. They have kind of did a little remaster for it a couple years ago. So I'm actually replaying it now. I kind of started replaying it again last week on the Switch.
Oh, cool.
But
Nice.
I originally had it for Xbox 360. Super fun game. It acts as like Ghostbusters 3, like totally takes place like early 90s. All the guys voice their characters 100%. It has a new story that ties in with the original, which also kind of ties in with Afterlife. I think Afterlife kind of retconned the game as like a third movie. But it has a really good story, really good new characters. You play like a new recruit that's like tagging along for these Ghostbusting adventures. And it has like everything that we want to see in a Ghostbusters. There's tons of Ghostbusting in this, which so super fun. The controls are kind of cool. It's third person. You know, like you're shooting proton packs, you're trapping ghosts. That part's really fun. Anyway, I had Ghostbusters the video game at number 4.
Love that.
At number 3, I had Ghostbusters 2, the second movie, the 1989 movie. I had that at number 3. Talked about that a lot last week when we reviewed the movie. I think it's a better sequel than people remember. I really enjoy it. I think, yes, it turned into the more family-friendly version of the original Ghostbusters, but I still think it's a very enjoyable movie because it's such you like those characters so much and you get to see some really good things. Ghostbusters 2, I had number 3. At number 2, I had The Real Ghostbusters, the animated series.
Nice.
Which was like one of my favorite cartoons growing up. And again, it's probably a little bit before your time because I think that was like late 80s. Because I think it was happening when the second movie came out. I think the cartoon series was on. But basically it's like I look at it as like an alternate reality version of the Ghostbusters. Even though there's some of the same characters, the ghost dogs are in it. They even talk about Vigo the Carpathian after like the second movie had come out. They talk about that. There's, but they had a ton of toys. I had all the toys from the show. It was really good, super fun. They even re-released some of the toys just a couple years ago. You can still, I think, kind of find them in some of like the action figure aisles of some of like the big discount stores and whatnot. But yeah, that series was super fun, and Slimer was like a sidekick in it too. So that also tied into like the ecto cooler craze, the high C. Whatnot.
Oh my gosh, Slimer was such a like iconic part of like Ghostbusters growing up. I definitely saw the cartoon. I did not watch it religiously, but it would play like before school on some days, and that was a show that we watched. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, there was another show, and I don't have it on my list, but there was a sequel series to that called the Extreme Ghostbusters, which was actually like Egon kind of is like the old guy that like gets it started and stuff. But that one wasn't bad. It just wasn't as good as the real Ghostbusters. And then obviously number 1 is the original. It's the original Ghostbusters number 1. It's gonna be number 1 on your list. We already know. It is. Don't even. But the original Ghostbusters, all-time classic. Everything we talked about last week. It's one of Bill Murray's best movies. Like, you think of any of these guys in their acting roles, like you think of Harold Ramis, you think of Ernie Hudson, you think of Dan Aykroyd. You think of Ghostbusters, and IGN is doing like a greatest movie monsters in history kind of like bracket thing right now, and Stay Puft I know is super high up on the list. So just like
Let's go.
That iconic, but that's so yeah. Ghostbusters number 1.
Love it. I love that. We do have a very similar list. My top 5 Ghostbuster video game, movie, TV show list. Number 5, I had Ghostbusters Afterlife. This was like the original reboot remake that gave us the nostalgia back that we had been waiting for, that another Ghostbuster movie totally missed on a couple years before that. So, and then number 4, I had Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I enjoyed it a lot. That was a great movie, like we just talked about, and I liked it better than Afterlife, like I said. Number 3, we had the exact same. I had Ghostbusters 2 because it's fucking all-time great. But this property, which I and most folks who have played it and are Ghostbuster nerds consider the sequel to Ghostbusters 2, I have Ghostbusters the video game. Like you said, it is fucking awesome because it has all of the original Ghostbuster voices in it. It was written by Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd. Like, obviously they voiced it. It's a game that gives you, like, how cool would it be if like you got to play as like a new recruit Ghostbuster where you're learning the ropes while doing a story with all of the same characters. Like, it's fucking awesome. I've not played the remastered version, but as we've been talking about it now, I'm like, okay, well, I know what I'm going to buy the second I get off this, and my sons and I are going to play it. So and the story is great. It does a great job of like picking up after 2 and giving us like that's the same vibe that we wanted in a Ghostbusters sequel that we never got after Ghostbusters 2. And then also for my number 1, Ghostbusters number 1, the original, the OG. It set the standard. They can't capture exactly what was there, but we appreciate it because it set the bar so high. It kicked off a franchise that people will know for many, 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 many years. So, number 1, Ghostbusters number 1.
This is why I'm glad we didn't just do movies, because we would have had the exact same list if we would have done just the 5 movies.
Yeah.
We would have ranked them all exactly the same way. It would have been
Yes.
1, 2, 5, 4, 3, right? Like
Yeah.
if you put them
Yes.
in order they came out. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
I
good deal.
agree with that. Cool. All right. My There Can Be Only 5 list was in kind of the essence of what this more recent Ghostbusters franchise is. Mine is like top 5 reboots or remakes. So my kind of thought behind it was like I said, in kind of how this movie was, I consider these 2 new Ghostbusters as like a reboot, but it's technically sequel
Right.
to the original. But like we're getting new characters, new Ghostbusters, whole new reboot of it. So that's how my head was thinking when I was making up this list. But yeah, let's jump into it. Number 5, I had Jurassic World. When Jurassic World came out in theaters, it was like the magic from the original Jurassic Park movie was captured again. People were losing their minds. Just like when The Force Awakens came out right away or early on, people were like, Jurassic Park is back. Chris Pratt was like this badass action hero that everybody loved. Like Jurassic World. The movies after, nowhere near as good as Jurassic World.
Preach.
But it was such a good like reboot. We got the original, we got the park back. Like I think that's a part of Jurassic Park that if you don't have.
It was the coolest thing about Jurassic World is you finally got to see the park open.
Yeah, and what it would be like if it went wrong when there's actually people there. So I loved that movie. And then number 4, I had the Rise of the Planet of the Apes and that new franchise that we have now got these freaking amazing, super serious, dramatic Planet of the Apes movies that started with a cool, different version of Planet of the Apes with James Franco, where we're in like modern times and Caesar is like just an ape in an enclosure. And then we slowly see over the movies that this thing kicked off, like how we got to where the original movies were set. So I love that franchise, and I can't wait for this next one, to the next movie to drop. And then my number 3 reboot that I think is fucking awesome and doesn't get any credit that it deserves is the reboot of Star Trek with Chris Pine. It is so fucking good. I know there's a lot of people out there that have a problem with how him and Spock are. Like, they never really feel like they're good friends and partners in crime. But they do they pick up on that in like the second and third one that came out. But man, when the trailer dropped for the reboot of just Star Trek with Chris Pine like rolling up on his motorcycle, looking at Starship Enterprise being like built in the distance from like a cornfield, fuck, so cool. I fucking loved it. So that movie is perfect in my mind for Star Trek. So gives you the classic original, like old school, like very original Star Trek vibe in a modern movie. And Chris Pine is fucking awesome as Captain James T. Kirk. That's my number 3. Number 2, I almost had this at number 5 because we talk about this franchise a lot in every other list. It seems like this comes up, but it is my favorite character of any properties ever. And so I had to put it on this list, but I didn't want to put it at number 1. I wanted to have number 2 so I could talk about another franchise. But I have Batman Begins, Christian Bale's Batman, Christopher Nolan's Batman. Like, what a reboot of a franchise. It gave us the modern day superhero movies that we get now. It's because of those movies in the franchise. Christian Bale's fucking awesome. Heath Ledger's fucking awesome. Tom Hardy's great. Like, one of the best reboots of all time. And then number 1, technically we've only got one movie of it so far. We're getting a second one here soon. But this movie, like, it struck every nerd chord of mine that, like, I instantly fell in love with the franchise. I liked them as a kid, but, like, wasn't really that invested in them. And this movie came out, and I'm like, this is one of the coolest fucking characters ever. Tom Hardy's Mad Max. Fury Road is such a cool post-apocalyptic epic with amazing music, cinematography, like setting, very original. It just feels like a comic book if it was a movie. I fucking love the Mad Max movie. Yep. I really wanted a new, like a sequel with Tom Hardy as Mad Max, but I will take a Furiosa prequel if that still gives me the fix that movie created. So, so yeah, there's a ton of reboots out there. I missed a bunch, but as I was putting my list together, yeah, there were so many. But when I was putting my list together, like, these were the ones as I was going down and looking through that, like, immediately popped up. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've got to have that somewhere. Mm-hmm. And then when I got to 5, I was like, all right, I'm going to do those 5 and move on. So that's my list.
I like your list. I like your list. It's a good list. This was one of those ones, and we've talked about before, like, I have to write down like 10 movies and I have to pick stuff off that I don't want to. But I was trying to like rank them by, and it wasn't by franchise. It was like, which I think is I need to think what is the best individual movie on this list. So that was kind of the way I did it. And I wanted this honorable mention on here because we haven't talked about this movie a lot. But I stayed away from what I think are sequels. So if it's actually a continuation of an original franchise and it's more of a sequel than necessarily a remake, then I stayed away from it. So I don't have Fury Road on my list for that reason. Otherwise it would have been. So that's why that one's not on there. Honorable mention, I put Peter Jackson's King Kong.
Oh,
because we haven't talked about that movie a lot, but like, obviously King Kong's been remade a couple times, because I think the original came out in like 1933. It was remade, I think it was 33. It's been made, I think, 4 times. Anyway, Peter Jackson's version of King Kong, and this was hot off of Lord of the Rings. He makes a new King Kong. Very underrated, I think, in the way people view it. It was one of the best movies I saw that year. I remember after I saw it, I was like, man, I just watched something freaking awesome.
Amazing.
The way they developed Skull Island is its own like character with all these different creatures and stuff. I thought that was super fucking awesome. Like, and I liked the casting. Jack Black's awesome in that movie. Obviously Adrian Brody, he's okay. I don't have a problem with it. Yeah, it's a great movie. Like, if you haven't ever seen the 2005 King Kong, like, highly recommended.
Like that time period that they did it in, like early, like 1910s to 1920s vibe. Like,
yeah,
God, it was great.
It's really great. And then so to get to my top 5 list, we only have one that matches. So, but I had some of the ones that you had mentioned, I had written down on my like whittle it down list. So at number 5, I had X-Men First Class. I really liked the direction they went when they rebooted X-Men. I liked the casting a ton. Big fan of Fassbender as Magneto. I thought he was fantastic. Yeah. I liked McAvoy as Professor X. Obviously, the one I liked the least is actually Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique, and I didn't care for it a whole lot. And I know she's big point in the movie, but I really liked that one. Obviously, we got a lot of like kind of random characters in it that really weren't like original X-Men. Nicholas Hoult I thought was a great Beast. We got Banshee in that. There was a lot of great things about the movie. Kevin Bacon's bad guy was awesome. I really liked that and how they tied it into like the Cuban Missile Crisis. I thought that was pretty cool as well.
I thought that was great. Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say like Days of Future Past I think is even better.
So fucking good.
It's great. What a great sequel.
I think both versions of the X-Men franchises, like some had perfect casts for characters and others. Like I thought Mystique from the original, like the original Hugh Jackman version was like perfect Mystique. Jennifer Lawrence, I couldn't see past Jennifer Lawrence. Like it didn't feel like Mystique. But I like those franchises. That franchise, that was one that I looked at and was like, oh, would I put it on there? But again, both live action X-Men franchises, they don't hit like their
first 2
hits.
Movies are great. Like they both, their first 2 are great, and then they just kind of shit after that.
Drop off. Anyway, sorry, continue.
No, you're good. And then at number 4, I had a movie we've talked about a ton, and you probably get sick of me talking about it, but number 4, I had Dread.
Nice.
As far as a remake reboot
I'm
goes,
an idiot.
like
of course,
you're an idiot. Dread's amazing. I'm not going to go into it, but we've talked about it enough times. But Dread's fucking phenomenal.
Yep.
At number 3, I had John Carpenter's The Thing, which is a remake of a movie from the 1950s, which was a remake of another like silent film, which is crazy, like called The Thing from Above or something. But anyway, yeah, it's a remake. Completely, it's my favorite horror movie of all time. I think I've said that before. I think it's perfect. The practical effects are amazing. The sense of dread in the movie, the isolation, it's everything a horror movie should strive to be. Plus you get Kurt Russell as your protagonist, which you can't get much cooler than that. So I had The Thing at number 3. And number 2, I had Casino Royale. If you're gonna reboot one of the most iconic franchises in history, and you made arguably one of the best entries in a franchise that has 20 plus movies, that's insane. And I think Casino Royale was perfect. It's Bond's like first mission. It's when he gets his license to kill, like complete reboot. Everybody was skeptical about Daniel Craig, but he turned out to be a badass James Bond. And his sequels are all of high caliber. Like there is not a dud in the bunch. And I thought that was probably the biggest impact that his movies made on the franchises. They were all of quality. So I had Casino Royale at number 2. And then the movie that we both had on our list at number 1, I had Batman Begins.
There it is.
I almost cheated, and I was going to put Batman 89, Batman Begins, and The Batman, because they're all technically like reboots of the same franchise. But Batman Begins, I think, because of how low Batman got after Batman and Robin, and they brought in somebody who at the time was not as iconic as he is now, Christopher Nolan, to reboot this franchise. And perfection. Like his trilogy of movies are amazing. I like Batman Begins. Like I know Dark Knight's the better movie, but I think Batman Begins is like, as far as origin for Batman goes, man, they killed it with that one because it's fantastic. I mean, I think they were so dead on with how they made that origin that's why when they decided to do the Batman, they're like, we're just gonna, he's already Batman. We're not going to tell that story again because they did such a good job. Plus, it's, again, like we talk about how important Batman is if you're a superhero movie fan. Like 89 was so important because of what it led to. We talked about that last episode. Batman Begins was so important because, I don't think if you don't have the success that those movies have and you don't see the quality of movie you can get in a superhero film, you're not getting these high quality superhero movies that we are now, right? Like superhero movies used to be like video game movies. Like there was just a ton of shitty ones, right? And there was some good ones, but then you'd get a ton of shitty ones. And I think that's why Batman Begins is number one on the remake reboot list. Anyway, that's my list.
This is why I like when we do some of these kind of off the wall, it's like there's movies that we have different lists, but it gives us a chance to talk about essentially 10 great movies that I'm like, oh my God, Dread, yes, easily could have been on my list. Like those are the things that I like about when we do these, is that we get to just talk about these fucking awesome movies that people should go and watch and need to. So I like your list. I like it.
I like yours too. I mean, again, all yours were on there. Like I had Rise of the Planet of the Apes on my list at one point, moved it off, Tough. It's a good franchise too. It's just not, it's not one that like I'm going to rewatch a ton, And then I had Star Trek on there too. And I was like, boy, man, like that's a trilogy of movies that they're all good. They're all really good. And the thing they changed the most is it's like Star Trek with more action is basically what it is, right? It's less exploration and more action. And I know some of the Star Trek purists, that was their biggest issue with it, was like you turned Star Trek into an action franchise when it's not supposed to be. That's not what it is. But again, you're trying to appeal to the masses, right? Like with a reboot like that. I keep trying to get my kids to watch that movie and they're like, no.
Oh,
I know.
I actually haven't put that on because I've just not thought about it. But now that we're talking about it, that is a movie that they need to watch. Space battles and aliens and like it's freaking cool. That scene where with like the Beastie Boys blasting when he stole the car and like jumps out of the car and shoots it off a cliff, like that set the tone for the movies, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm in for it. So
I even tried to convince Reagan. I was like, well, you know who plays Captain Kirk's dad in this movie? And she's like, who? And I'm like, Chris Hemsworth. And she's like, oh my gosh, now maybe I will watch it.
Thor's in it. Thor is Chris Pine's
and it was like
dad.
One of his first movies too.
Yes,
Hemsworth's first movies. Yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, yeah, good stuff, man. Good lists. Good to talk about some of those like all time movies. So that's awesome. But that takes us to the end of episode 42. Big premiere movie of the week, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. If you're watching us on YouTube, click that like and subscribe. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. If you're not watching us on YouTube, hopefully you're listening to us on one of many podcast networks, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Podcast Index. You can always find some of our short clips and videos on social media at Movie Dads Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and then shitty TikTok. I'm
Don't
mad.
say those things.
I know.
They hear it.
It was hitting, and now it sucks.
They'll not post our stuff.
Got to get back in that algorithm. Good. We love you, TikTok. But we'll be back next week, episode 43, another premiere for a movie that actually came out this week, but because we were doing Ghostbusters, we didn't review it this week. But we're going to do the Amazon Prime exclusive Jake Gyllenhaal starring reboot of Roadhouse. Remake of Roadhouse. Roadhouse. And we get to see the acting debut of the UFC's one, Conor McGregor, the Notorious. And I'm sure it's nothing but entertaining.
Yeah. Oscar worthy, I imagine.
Razzie, maybe. I don't know. I'm sure it's entertaining. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. And we will see you next week.
Bye.